Let's look at an else-if example. Here I've written a function that checks what the percent is and then writes the letter grade out. Instead of prompting for input, we're actually going to grab that input from an HTML page, and we're going to learn about how this function works later. You've seen it in some assignments already, and we're getting very close to learning about it. After we've determined the letter grade from the input, then we're going to write the output back to that HTML page. For the condition, we're using an else-if statement, and that's where we chain together, after the else, a new else-if statement. And we keep chaining these else-if statements in until we've covered all the conditions that we want to check. Let's look at how that integrates into the HTML page. So in order to see the HTML page, we can do that right in Atom. We could also open it up in Chrome, but we can use Control-Shift-H if you install the packages for Atom that I suggested in Setup. Then you will see that it will open that HTML page. Here we have the header, determine letter grades, and you can kind of see how the information in the file maps to the HTML page that's displayed, but we'll learn about that in more detail. The critical part here is that we are loading the JavaScript from a separate file. Previously, we've been writing our JavaScript code right between those tags, right in the file named .html. Well, in this case, we're writing the file with a .js extension, and as long as that file is in the same directory or folder as the HTML file, it will read in that file to find the JavaScript. Well, here is that JavaScript. So when the page loads, this code runs. Well, what happens when we run a function definition? Well, it just stores that function into a memory location that we can get back to by calling this name. We're not actually calling the function until we click the button. On the on click, we've written JavaScript code right here to call that function called findLetterGrade. So when we click on this button, it goes ahead and finds the letter grade. I didn't put a percentage there, so it gave me an F. I can put a percentage in there, and then I get the letter grade C for 78%. So I can control the running of that function by calling it on the on click of a button. Let's just take an example here of some JavaScript code that is not inside the function. So here are the curly braces that define the body of the function, and this alert is outside the body of the function. If I save that change, you'll see that the page was reloaded, and this code is running. It stored these statements into the function name, and then it called this alert. Now that the function has been loaded, we can call that function to be used by clicking on the button. Okay? So what we've done is we've just separated our JavaScript code into a separate file by using this source attribute, and we call functions defined in that JavaScript by using this on-click button. And so you don't have to worry about being able to write that code yet. We'll be going over that in more detail. So let's focus on the function. Here it's pulling the data from the page, that 45, and storing it into a %grade variable, and making sure we convert that to a number. Once that conversion is done, we can start checking the value of it. If it's greater than 90, then it goes ahead and puts in an A, and we're done. Well, it was not greater than 90 because we put in 45, so then it has to go to the else condition and check. This is not true. 45 is not greater than or equal to 80, so we have to go to the else condition again. 45 is not greater than or equal to 70, so again we go to the else condition. It's not greater than or equal to 60, so we go to the else condition. Here, finally, it's true. 45 is greater than or equal to 0, and so it went ahead and put the letter grade variable and stored F in there. Then line 19 takes that variable and then dumps it back onto the HTML page. And we'll be learning about that more later, so you don't have to worry about the details of how it gets back on the page yet. Now, the great thing about the else-if statements is that it stops checking once the condition is true. So if we had 90 in here, the very first condition is true. It sets the grade to A, and then it does not check any of these other blocks. It just jumps down to the next line. Next line to execute is line 19 and puts that letter grade in. Because of that mutual exclusion, we know if the first condition is false, then when we get to the second condition, we already know that the grade was not greater than or equal to 90, because if it was, we would not have gotten to this check. And therefore, we didn't have to check that that grade was less than 90. Let's switch up the order here. And then I'll go ahead and save it. And because I saved it, it reran that code, so it popped up "this runs on load" again. That's a little annoying, so let's get rid of it. Go ahead and save it again. Now we don't get that pop-up. Now it looks like almost exactly the same code, we just switched the order. But what happens is now if we put in a grade of 85, our letter grade is now wrong. It checked 85 was not greater than or equal to 90. So it went to the next check. 85 is greater than or equal to 70, and so it gave us the C. It doesn't matter that it's also greater than or equal to 80, because this is only checked when the previous condition is false. So we could correct that by adding an and making sure our percent grade was not only greater than or equal to 70, but also less than 80. And then when this check hit for the 85, because the second half of the condition in the "and" is false, that will make the entire statement false, even though the first half, that it is greater than or equal to 70, and requires both conditions to be true. And therefore, when we hit the 85 here, it will be false. So let me go ahead and save. I'll put the 85 back in. And now we have the correct value B again. So you can take advantage of the fact that these conditions are run in order from top to bottom to write your code, or you can explicitly lay out every condition. A lot of times we take advantage of that in the very last condition, and instead of having an else if here, we just use the else. If it's greater than or equal to 90, or if it's in the range of 70 to 80, or if it's in the range of greater than 80, or if it's greater than 60, then we'll never get to this else statement. All of these things above have to be false before we can get to the F. Well, if all of these things are false, then we know it has to be an F. Can save it and test it out. The 45 did not meet any of the conditions as we went down through the if and else ifs, and so for the very last else, we set it to F. We have 65. Here we had false, 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 and then finally we hit the true where it's greater than or equal to 60. We've already eliminated the cases of 70 and above, and so it gives us the value of D.